And welcome to Parenting on Empty. You can find us on parentingonempty.com. This is podcast number 11.
Today we're going to talk about a quote that a friend of mine posted on Facebook. And when I first read it through, my initial response was very negative. And I thought, no way. I don't agree with that at all. And then it was one of those quotes that kind of sticks with you. And I eventually had to go back and reread it about 5 times. And I would like to talk about it today and just kind of toss it around and talk about some of our responses to it and whether we think this is an accurate portrayal of good parenting or what. So
Hold
the quote,
us in suspense no longer.
I will give you the quote. The quote is, "If you cannot train your child to do as they ought, it is far better to lower your standards and enjoy them as they are than to allow your looks of displeasure to become the norm. A child may grow up to be undisciplined and self-willed, but there's no reason to add to it a feeling of being unloved and unable to please." And when I first read the quote, my initial response was, you never lower your standards as a parent. That's crazy talk.
That's crazy talk. That's quite a mouthful, though, what you just read, so you might want to break it down a little bit. Could you
It's if you can't train a child to behave the way you want them to behave, then instead of continuing to hold this standard that they are not achieving and making them feel your displeasure, basically it's saying it's better for them to grow up as children that are not behaved well or properly or that don't behave well than to grow up as a child who feels unloved and incapable of pleasing anybody. And there's just something in me that says that is so wrong. I mean, not the unloved and unable to please. Obviously, I don't want my child to feel that way.
You feel like you're giving up, though.
But yes, you feel like, okay,
Throw
you
in the towel.
Are incapable of behaving appropriately. And to me, the minute you do that, it seems to me that you've given up on your child.
Right.
And that you are compromising. And for me, compromise is, well, a dirty word. So it's really a difficult quote. But at the same time, I kept coming back to it because I think the intent is not actually to say, give up your standards. But I think the intent is more that frequently we try to manipulate our children by our displeasure and by giving them bad looks and by telling them what they're not doing well and just a lot of constant negative reinforcement. And it doesn't get us what we want anyway. It's not effective. So I think what I take away from this quote is that's not an effective way to get what you want out of your children.
Right.
So just let go of it.
Okay.
And that in letting go of that standard, you don't feel compelled to be constantly checking if they measure up.
Yeah. Now, before we go any further, we should give credit where credit is due. Did
Yes.
you identify who quoted?
I did not. It's by a man named Michael Pearl. And you looked him up on the internet because we'd never heard of him before.
Yes, I did.
And actually, I don't agree with most of the other stuff that he writes.
I don't think I do either.
But even when a person says a lot of stuff you don't agree with, they can say 1 or 2 things that are highly provocative and that deserve some thought.
Exactly. Nobody says something that everybody agrees with. I don't totally agree with everything you say.
Yes. So, while I wouldn't necessarily ascribe to much of his parenting perspective, this is one that I think is well worth investigating. And possibly I find it worth investigating because I think it's probably one that I struggle with.
Right.
Because I have this very strong idea of what's right and what's wrong. and I want our children to do what's right.
Right. And in full disclosure here, we don't really know much about what this guy writes about or his wife writes about, and they've written several books and whatnot, but we don't. This is really our first
cursory
introduction.
Investigation has made me recognize that I don't agree with the things that I read.
Right.
Most of the things I read, I did not agree with.
Google search,
but I have
Wikipedia.
not read everything that he has written.
Right,
No.
right. So we're not claiming to know anything really much about, but we're just basically kind of honing in on that concept, that attitude of what kind of attitude you should have, and what are your children going to pick up as you give them those glances and that judgmental look.
And I'm not sure why I feel the need to deliver that. Because it is a defective. So far, it's never accomplished anything. So, for some reason, I feel like I'm complicit in their bad behavior if I don't do that.
You know, that's a good point, and I don't know if this necessarily relates, but, you know, every nonverbal look, those looks of judgment or even looks of pleasure or whatever it is, it's up to the child to interpret that, because you're not adding any words to that look.
Right.
You're shaking your head in disapproval. You're not putting any words to that, so it's totally up to the child to interpret. What does that mean? Does that mean you disapprove of my actions, or you disapprove of me? And, you know, some children probably aren't that sophisticated enough to say, you know, my actions aren't necessarily me. They're just an outward expression of me to some extent, but it's not really me at the core.
Yeah. I don't think any of them are.
Well, you know, we always want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, I mean, so
it expresses disapproval of the child.
Yeah. That I'm not worthy.
I'm not good enough.
So yeah, that could be pretty dangerous.
It is.
Communication.
And I find that a very challenging perspective for me personally. So I've been kind of thinking this through and asking myself, what's more important? The long-term takeaway, how my child feels about themselves and how they think I feel about them and think about them, or that they know whether I approve or disapprove of what they are currently doing. And it's kind of convicting because, I mean, obviously the right answer there is the long-term effects that it has on the kid. And I've been trying just of late, very recently, to kind of correct that instinctive response I have, that I feel compelled to communicate. That was the wrong thing. You shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're not doing that, then how do you reinforce appropriate behavior and discipline inappropriate behavior? How do you let them know what the right thing is, you know?
Right. Yeah, you know, and I think it's a bit of a balance. And of course, we're just talking about what we think. We're not experts on this is the way it should be and this is the way it always should be. Every kid's different, and interestingly enough, every parent is different too. But for me, you know, I remember as a kid when you were told, you know, if you say something bad about your brother, you say something negative about your sister, you have to say 10 things positive in order to balance out that one negative thing. So go ahead. I want to hear that list of 10 things good that you think about your sister, 10 positive things about your brother, and then it will all balance out. Now, you know, that never really made a whole lot of sense to me, and I never quite enjoyed that exercise. But I think the philosophy is that if you convince your child, hey, I'm on your side. I love you and I care about you and I'm rooting for you. You're number one in my book and I want to see you succeed. And you keep giving that message, then I think that can help balance out when you say, oh man, this was what you did here wasn't good. And I want to help you with that. It's not that I think you're a bad person and that you're always going to screw up and you're always going to mess up. But in this area, I want to help you. That makes sense?
Yeah, there's part of me that thinks I don't know that there's ever something that truly counterbalances the negative. Because most of us think, especially when we're younger, we have some pretty negative self-perceptions. And when someone outside of ourselves, whom we respect, says something negative, it reinforces what we already think about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think any positive propping it up really changes that.
You know, I agree with you. There are some things that that stick in your mind, and no matter what you say, it's never going to go away. However, the reality of parenting is that we are going to have those looks of disappointment. They're just going to come. It's going to be a reaction. So we can't necessarily kid ourselves and say, well, I'll just make a point never to do that.
Yeah.
I'll never have that expression on my face. I think it's a worthy goal, though, to say, you know, maybe I should look in the mirror a little bit more. And how do I look? I mean, do I have this constant scowl on my face that says, I am disappointed in you. I do not approve of what you're doing. So maybe it would behoove us to do a little bit of practice, facial practice in the mirror. Do we have a pleasant look on our face? So that might not be a bad idea, but the reality is that there are going to be times when we just have that look of disappointment. Oh, you let me down, or that's not what I was expecting to happen here in this situation.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I know I put way too much value in talking, because with our first child, it's been evident that talking doesn't really do it for her. But hope springs eternal. And so I do think that along with positively reinforcing the things that you appreciate and recognizing the good things about your child, that probably it's a good thing for you to acknowledge what your weakness is. And our kids know that I'm incredibly intense, and that when I respond to something, I respond 100%. And so if I am disapproving, it's a big disapproval. And if I'm happy, it's a big happy. But I think if I can talk with them, and it'll always be after the occasion, because you don't anticipate usually, I'm going to be disapproving here. I'm going to say something that could be hurtful. If I can acknowledge to them that what I'm communicating is true about your behavior, but I need to be very clear that that behavior does not make me feel differently about you. The thing is, though, it's still, I mean, they can think, yeah, you love a loser.
Well,
which is something I think I grew up thinking.
Okay.
Because my parents loved me unconditionally, but there were lots of times that I felt they loved me. That's nice, but no one else will because I'm such a failure.
Gee, yeah.
And it was, they loved me because they're supposed to. They're my parents, you know?
It's in the contract.
Yeah.
Well, you know, go back to that quote and just read the last part of that, because I wanted to say something about that.
A kid may grow up to be undisciplined and self-willed, but there is no reason to add to it a feeling of being unloved and unable to please.
Yeah, and I think that's the what I wanted to key in on, was the fact that you're just adding to something that's going to happen, not necessarily to be fatalistic, but you know, there's certain personality traits that's who that person is, and they can learn to adjust and fine tune that. But as things go, you have to decide: am I just going to add to whatever they might be feeling? If they're not feeling good about themselves, if they're feeling negative towards their attitude or behavior or whatever it is, then as a parent, you say, well, am I just going to add to their feelings? And just as you said, as a child, you had some negative feelings, even though there was positive things going on and you felt loved and accepted by your parents, you just thought that they had to accept and love somebody who was bad. So those are going to be there. In reality, those feelings are going to be there. So as a parent, you have to decide, do I just want to add to it? And that's the part that got me thinking, that part of that quote that got me thinking, am I just adding on? Am I just piling on if I have those looks of disappointment? And that's the part that made me pause and think, well, I need to really give some serious thought about just the kind of nonverbals that I express. What do you think about asking for feedback? Would you get honest feedback from your children if you say, hey, what do you think when I have this look on my face?
Yeah, I don't know. Depends on how analytical the kid is, probably. Mm-hmm. I know that I've talked with both of our kids about body language, and it's taken me many years to convince them both that their body does speak. But they now do believe that. So they might both be at a time in their lives where they could actually give some appropriate feedback. But it probably would be worth at least exploring. I know that sometimes Mariah says to me, what when you look at me like that, it makes me feel, and then she'll say it.
Right.
Which is healthy, I think. Or she'll say, why are you looking at me like that? And that's a good check for me. We frequently talk about how our kids catch stuff from us more than they actually get stuff from intentional teaching.
Right.
Most things seem to be modeled more than if I just teach them, they will learn.
They're not writing any of this stuff down.
They're not. And much of what we say, I think, is just noise in the wind. So if we truly believe that, then, and I'm so uptight about, I want to communicate proper behavior and proper attitudes and proper belief systems and proper ways of interacting with other people, then probably the best thing that I could do is just treat them the way I think they should be and behave around them the way I think they should be behaving. So when I throw a dirty look their way or say, what are you thinking? And things that are kind of demeaning, essentially, I am treating them in a way that, and I'm modeling something that I don't want them doing to other people.
Okay, yeah.
And the result that I get not only makes them feel bad about themselves, but it also begins a behavior in them. It trains them almost in a negative sort of way to do exactly what I don't want them to do. Mm-hmm. It negatively reinforces a negative pattern of communication and behavior.
That's a lot of negatives.
It is a lot of negatives. So, maybe I need to believe more in the power of who I am and how God uses who we are to transform our kids. Mm-hmm. And that my job is more just to be there to provide, when your kids are small and you put them in a crib and the crib walls are either made of steel or hard plastic or wood. And so you put these padding bumpers, they're called, around the crib so your kid doesn't whack themselves and get bruised and all of that. I sometimes wonder if my job is more to provide the bumpers, to just kind of be the protective padding so the kid makes it through until they're capable of doing a lot of decision making and thinking through for themselves. Mm-hmm. And being able to make choices for themselves. And that frequently, I think my job is to be the light on their path so that they can see, oh, this is where I'm supposed to go and this is what I'm supposed to do. When really I'm more the shrubbery along the path to just help keep them walking.
Right, yeah.
And that it's God's job to be the light.
And to mature them
as
they grow. I don't know if this relates, but when children are creating things, and we've talked before about creativity and how you can really squelch that or celebrate it. But, when a child comes with this drawing and it's not good, I mean, it's a stick figure and you can't tell if it's a horse or a unicorn or a whale or a person. But your response is, wow, that's really good. I'm going to hang that up on the refrigerator. And because you want to encourage them. You don't want to discourage their efforts of creativity. But those efforts are not refined. They're not perfected. And when we make a transference into their behaviors and their personality, I kind of think there might be some parallels there, that it's still a work in progress. And even though it's not perfect, it's not exactly the way you would expect a finished product to look like, it's still good. I'm not talking about celebrating disrespect or saying, wow, that was wonderful the way you disrespected or disobeyed, but you're not looking at them with, you are a disappointment.
And I think that there's a difference between those two that you were just talking about, because disrespect, I mean, we have a 14-year-old and that's probably the number one thing right now. She just is instinctively disrespectful. And I truly think that that's probably a phase. I don't think that she's going to be a really disrespectful person after she gets through this.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we act like it's okay. But I think there's a difference between us consistently communicating, that's an inappropriate way to talk to me.
Right.
That, I think, is a legitimate form of communication. It's not making them feel bad, like you're a terrible person because you did this. It's just, that was inappropriate and you are not allowed to behave in that way.
You are what you said was hurtful, or what you said was inappropriate. Gets back to what we've talked about before, even how you have those fair fights or those arguments as a husband and wife. You don't say, you are a bad person, you are disrespectful.
Right.
You are this kind of person, and on you go. You just talk about, when you said this, I felt very disrespected. When you talked about this, I felt like I wasn't important.
And actually, that's a really good correlation, because that whole idea with a fair fight is the other person is not the enemy.
Right.
They're not the ones that you're fighting against. It's that you two have a relationship and you are trying to find a way. You're working together to overcome whatever this obstacle is in your relationship.
Exactly.
And I don't know that I've ever thought of parenting that way, but that's a really good perspective, that if we can communicate to them, we are working with you, and you and I are working in conjunction with God.
Right.
To make you into the kind of person that He created you to be, for you to become the best person that you can be.
Yes. For
you to find out what your gifts are, what your talents are, for you to become a functioning, positive contributor in the community, for you to be able to just grow and flourish.
Right.
That you and I are working on this together. And it's not, you just have to toe the line because we said so. Although, that is attractive at times.
Exactly.
Gotta tell you.
Easy way out. That's the easy way out.